Let me present the panel for this, what we are calling the climax of our conference. We have spent about a day and a half looking at issues. What is the role of innovation? Where are we lacking? What needs to be done? We have heard a number of perspectives from academics who are teaching. We have heard from corporates who are hiring. We have heard from consultants who are going around educating for innovation. Now here we have the plenary session looking at how do universities respond to the need that we are all feeling. And if we believe that the landscape is shifting, the demand on the universities or the expectations of the universities are shifting, how do universities respond? And where are the opportunities? What can we learn from our successes? What can we learn from our failures, both from India and from abroad? So we have a very distinguished panel. Let me introduce, if I may request the panelists, as I introduce them, to come to the podium. Dr. Narendra Jadhav, he is the member, Planning Commission, and member of National Advisory Council. Dr. Jadhav is a leading educationalist, eminent economist and policymaker, well-known social scientist, and a best-selling author. It's pretty hard to get all this in one. And Prime Minister, in fact, Dr. Mohan Singh, in fact, I think it's in your brochure, a role model for the disembarked millions in our country. One of his books has been in the bestseller list for quite some time, How Education Can Make a Social Major Transformation. In fact, he's dear to me because he's also a PhD in economics from the university where I hold my tenure, Indiana University. And he has worked in several policy-making bodies as well as banks. He has authored 14 books, 30 major official reports, 100 research papers, received the Sahitya Akademi Award for his biographical novel, The Outcast, a memoir. I think many of you have been introduced to that book, so it should be an interesting one. He is now the driver of educational policy for the government. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Please take a seat. And we have been talking about engineering education, and we have Professor M.S. Anand, and from the director of IIT Madras. Gold medalist, in fact, we used to call you Professor Thermodynamics. I mean, he made thermodynamics come alive, and that was his claim to fame. And I'm an alma mater of IIT Madras as well, so it's my distinct honor and privilege to welcome him. He obtained his PhD in molecular thermodynamics from University of Florida. He has been the head of the Department of Chemical Engineering, Dean of Academic Courses, Dean of Academic Research before becoming the director in 2001. And as an alumni, I can tell you, he was the one who has really energized the alumni base of IIT Madras. And in fact, we have meetings all over in New York and California and sometimes here in New Delhi. And we really love hearing and listening to Dr. Anand. In fact, he's a fellow of Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers, Indian National Academy of Engineering, a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee to Cabinet and the National Manufacturing Competitiveness Council. And he's going to bring the perspective from the engineering schools. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very distinguished guest with us, all the way from Copenhagen, Denmark. And it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Dr. Johan Roos. Just a few weeks back, he stepped down the presidency of Copenhagen Business School, Denmark. Dr. Roos is within the Innovation Academy, within the academic circles. Professor Roos is the quintessential thought leader. He has not only written about innovation, he has been the driver behind the innovation movement within Europe, and in fact, the managing director for what they call as Imagination Lab Foundation in Switzerland. And he has been the dean of the Stockholm School of Economics, as well as until recently the president of the Copenhagen Business School. You all have played with Legos, right? Co-inventor of the patented Lego Serious Player tool. Okay. We cannot have a better panel than this to represent the issues that we have been discussing. There are issues that are so close to our heart, we are all passionate about. We want to listen to these panelists, and I'm sort of hoping their presentation followed by the interaction will be one that will take us to a new level from this conference. So let me invite Dr. Narendra Jadhav first to provide.
Thank you, Professor Charles Dhanraj. Well, Professor M.S. Anand, Professor Johan Roos, Professor Rushikesh Krishnan, Dr. Charles Dhanraj, both of these are co-chairs of this conference, distinguished participants and friends. It's indeed a great pleasure as well as an honor to be here to participate in this Innovation Educators Conference. Let me formally welcome you to the main plenary session, plenary panel, day 2 of this Innovation Educators Conference. This is the climax of this conference, as we were just told. But first of all, I would like to commend ISB for organizing this 2-day conference on a subject of great contemporary relevance. Personally, since there is no separate moderator for this debate, I have a double role to play. I'm going to be a moderator as well as a panelist. The theme for this panel is quite provocative, as you have seen. The theme is, where have the universities failed us, and how can universities advance the innovation landscape of our country? And we have a very distinguished panel to debate on this issue. As was said, we could not possibly have a better panel than what we have here. And I'm referring to these two gentlemen, Professor M.S. Anand and Professor Johan Roos. Let me set out the general layout of this debate. The total time allotted is 90 minutes. And we are already about 20 minutes late. We have started. Okay, all right. So this 90 minutes, I want to divide this 90 minutes into four different groups. First, I will have some opening remarks in my capacity as a moderator. Then there would be 2 rounds of discussion. Round 1, we can talk about the assessment of the situation, and round 2, we can talk about the way forward, keeping in mind the 2 main themes of the conference. In the round 1, each panelist will get 10 minutes each, and I will also work as a panelist there, so I will also take 10 minutes there. So 30 minutes for round 1. Round 2, we can focus on way forward. There again, we'll have 10 minutes each to each one of the 3 distinguished panelists, and that will be another 30 minutes. And then we can leave 15 to 20 minutes for the Q&A. That is the general layout. Let me start with some opening remarks. As far as the assessment of the situation is concerned, let me say this, that not too long ago, a lot of people in our country used to boast about having the 3rd largest technically trained manpower in our country, but not anymore. You know, the trained manpower that we had was in conformity with the rate of economic growth at that time, when for a long time, we all recall that from 1951, when we started the planned economic development, for first 36 years, our rate of economic growth was averaging only 3.5%. After 1991 crisis and after the change of economic policy, our growth rate has accelerated tremendously, and we all know that first 10 years of reform, 1992 to 2002, our average growth rate was 6%. 2002 to 2005, it accelerated further to 8%, and 2005 to 2008, it accelerated even further to 9% plus. Then there was this global economic crisis in September 2008. After that, while every country was affected, we were also affected, but to a much lesser extent than what other countries did. And the first year of the crisis, 08-09, 2008-2009, we clocked a growth rate of 6.8%. That was shaving off about little more than 2 percentage points from our growth rate. And then that accelerated further. Again, it bounced back to 8% last year. We're talking about 8.6% this year and 9% next year, and possibly in the next 3 or 4 years, we are hoping to cross that threshold level of 10% double-digit growth. So the technically trained manpower that the university system is generating today is grossly inadequate, keeping in mind our accelerated growth and our vision of having a double-digit growth in none too distant future. In fact, I have been saying this ad nauseum, that there is a lot of talk about demographic dividend, but unless we put our education sector in order, unless we put our skill development sector in order, what we talk about demographic dividend is going to become a demographic nightmare. So this is the time to change, and this is the time when we can put together our education sector. It has to be put in order now. If we don't do that, you know, the fortuitous opportunity that we have had in terms of demographic dividend would be squandered away, and then the future generations shall never forgive us. If you look at the university system today, we have 500 plus universities, and they are divided into 4 broad categories. Those which are central universities, then there are state universities, then there are deemed to be universities, and then there are private universities. And 500 plus universities, although we have 500 plus universities, what we have is, with 500 plus universities that we have, the mainstay of our university system is really the state universities. 87% of all students go to state universities. Although state universities are those which are most ignored ones, the fact remains that they are the mainstay, and that is where a lot of overhaul, a lot of reform is required, particularly to build the innovation element into our university system. I will talk about, I will make some points when my turn comes, but to debate, for the first round of the debate, it is clearly understood that the university system has clearly failed to provide the innovative talent that we require and we are going to require in future, and this is the time to change. So in the first part of the debate, we can concentrate on assessment of this situation, what exactly has gone wrong, and then in the second part, we will talk about what is the way forward. How do we change this situation, which, as I said, is imperative today. So with these brief opening remarks, let us start with the 2 panelists. And Professor Anand, would you like to go first?
Sir, I have everything about going forward. I have nothing about the university state.
Okay, all right, all right. Okay, Professor Roos, would you like to make some observation? Or shall I set the stage by talking about the assessment of the situation?
Fine.
Okay. I think that would pave the way for way forward in a more significant way. The university system in India can be seen in terms of at least four different aspects. One is access, second is equity, third is quality, and fourth is employability. And on each of these, there is a lot that needs to be done. We have failed the country in respect of each one of these. Not that things are not happening, there are things happening, but we'll come to that in the second part. But as far as these four dimensions are concerned, access, equity, quality, and employability, on all four, there has been a resounding failure today. Let's talk a little more about it. Let's talk about the access. The access is typically measured in terms of the gross enrollment ratio. The question asked is, what is the age group for the higher education? The age group for higher education is 18 to 22. If that is the age group for higher education, what proportion of youth in that age group have access? Quality comes later, mere access to higher education. That number is called the gross enrollment ratio. In 2007-2008, the GER in India was only 12.4%. A rough and ready estimate shows that we are close to 15% now, but the firm numbers that we have show that in 2007-2008, our gross enrollment ratio was only 12.4%. How good or how bad it is extremely bad, it is extremely inadequate. Just to give you some numbers, the global GER was 24% in that year, 2007-2008, when we were stuck at 12.4%, global GER was 24%. If you look at the GER of the advanced economies, so-called industrialized countries, the GER there was more than 58%. The average was 58%. There are countries where GER is 60 and 70% and more. Even for developing countries, if you look at developing countries, the average for 2007-2008 for the developing countries was as large as 18%. So India's GER in the year 2007-2008 was 2/3 of the average for developing countries and 1/2 of the world average, and grossly smaller, considerably smaller than the GER for the so-called industrialized countries. This clearly shows that we have a really long way to go, even as far as the access is concerned. It shows that the outreach of our university system is very, very small, and it certainly does not augur well for a country which is hoping to be achieving a double-digit growth in none too distant future. So access is very limited. Let's talk about equity. As I said, 2007-2008 was a limited access. The GER was as low as 12.4. But that 12.4 is an average for all the country. You divide that into male and female, rural and urban, poor and non-poor, among scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, minorities. The picture that emerges is nothing short of appalling. To give you an extreme example, in the year 2007-2008, for the scheduled tribe female from the rural areas, the GER was less than 2%. And I think we should all hang our head in shame that at this time and age, when we are talking about becoming a global superpower, for a very large strata of society, the GER was as low as 2%, less than 2%. So 98% of our students or youth in that particular social category did not even have access to higher education. Quality comes much later, sheer access. So that's so there is a lot to do as far as the equity is concerned. Quality of course leaves much to be desired, but the main problem there, as I see it, is that our university system has not been able to produce the talent which is required by the industry out there. There is in fact a growing chasm between what the industry needs and what the university system has been supplying. There can be a number of examples, but we don't need to go into details, but there is undoubtedly a chasm that has developed between the demand and supply here. The university system graduates which are churned out by the universities simply are not the kind of people who are required out there in the industry. This mismatch is going to become a very serious impediment as far as sustaining our high growth rate is concerned. In fact, I dare say, moving on to employability. Employability, I was told that this was discussed yesterday, 40 to 50% engineers, some estimates show even higher, 40 to 50% of engineers that we produce are quite simply unemployable, period. Now this is the situation. We are not turning out people in enough number, and the quality of people that we are turning out are not anywhere commensurate with the needs of the industry, and that is what is going to be a major impediment in future as far as maintaining and sustaining the high growth is concerned. In fact, personally speaking, as an economist, I know that the sheer momentum that we have gained is going to take us, to double-digit growth. But if you ask a question, is that going to be sustainable? The answer is certainly not. It will not be sustained unless we take stock of things and put our education sector in order. Unless we put our education and skill development sector in order, there is no way that we can sustain the double-digit growth, even if we succeed in achieving the double-digit growth. And therefore, this issue has become extremely important. So with that is the kind of picture that I want to present before you in terms of assessment. Now, this is not to say that nothing is happening. I can tell you a lot is happening. I will talk about it in detail in the following sessions, but I just want to give you a snapshot of what is happening. There are at least 6 things which are happening. There are six major initiatives are currently underway. One is establishment of the National Commission on Higher Education and Research, and I'll talk more about that. Then there is a bill pending in the Parliament about accreditation regulators, regulatory agency for accreditation, regulator for accreditation agencies. Third one is creation of tribunals at the state government level as well as the central government level. Then the fourth one is a bill that is pending with the Parliament about prevention of malpractices in technical and medical education. The fifth one is foreign education providers bill, which is also has been tabled in the Parliament. And the sixth one is innovation universities. We have been talking, 11th plan document talked about the innovation universities, and Planning Commission with the Ministry of Human Resource Development is working on the concept of innovation universities, and that is going to be launched in the near future. More about this will come later. I only want to say that it is wrong that the importance of education at this critical juncture is recognized at the highest level, and number of things are beginning to happen. We need to accelerate the pace of this change. I dare say that in the 64 years of our existence after independence, never before so many reforms in the education sector were on the board at the same time. Now this is better late than never. We are a late starter as far as major comprehensive reforms in higher education is concerned. We have just begun to do that, and going from here, going forward, it is going to be very useful to get the feedback from everybody, all the stakeholders, and that's why it makes me very happy that ISB has organized this conference on a subject of such great relevance today to the future of our nation. And I have absolutely no doubt that the enlightened discussion that is going to ensue, that is going to take place now, will throw lights on various dimensions of how to go ahead, what is the way forward. And I'm sure both of our distinguished colleagues will speak on that. May I now request Professor M.S. Anand to talk about the way forward. We can straight away go into way forward. Okay, and then it would be followed by Professor Johan Roos, and then I will give my own comments before the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Friends, a very good morning to all of you. I have to say that to say all our universities have failed is a somewhat uncharitable statement. First, I have to say that I go around talking in schools and say education is the art of living gracefully with ignorance. And it's partial knowledge, but ignorance, I think, communicates it more effectively. But I think to a large extent also, for example, up to undergraduate education, I think students survive a bad education. And thirdly, I have one more comment. The best teacher in our mythology was the mud statue of Drona. When Ekalavya learnt everything from the mud statue. So maybe we are taking the teaching profession too seriously. Students learn despite us very often. So I think we should remember these in perspective. But let me also say that we haven't spent too much money on education. Actually, we in IITs are somewhat fortunate, and even we started getting liberal funding only from 2000 onwards. Till then, it was a hand-to-mouth existence. And the state universities, like Professor Jadhav pointed out, have been very, very poorly funded. And there's the old American saying that if you pay money, you may get quality. If you don't pay, you're guaranteed not to get quality. So I think first you have to spend money on education. But having said that, let me take you through, what I think is required in managing creativity. And there's a slight shift in the time of my talk. I thought I was supposed to talk for half an hour, turns out it's 20 minutes. But nevertheless, so I'll skip a few slides, but I will try and take you through. This is the outline of my talk. I'm going to say a few words about engineering education. A little bit of semantics. I think that's been covered. It's about discovery, invention, and innovation. Then learning and creativity as we understand it. Again, I'll skip that. Large fraction of the audience already knows about right brain and left brain. I'll start really with managing creativity, and then suggest that bringing together unlike minds is the most important factor that leads to innovation.